In the last video, I made quite a controversial claim that Cliffe is probably correct in saying there's more important things in Catholic and Protestant apologetics than trying to straighten each other out on transubstantiation. I know a lot of other Catholic YouTubers have chimed in on this, but I would like to provide my argument for why I kind of agree with Cliffe Knectle here. I would like to preface this before I get accused of being a heretic, that I do believe in transubstantiation, and I do believe in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. What I do think, however, is that Cliffe is correct when he's saying, well, things like belief in Christ's resurrection, is more important. So before we could comment on this, in order to give you an accurate and fair representation of everyone's views involved, let us indeed watch through what Cliffe actually said.
Sir, really, I could give a rip whether you believe in transubstantiation or whether you believe communion is symbolic of the death of Christ. I really just don't think it makes that much difference. And I don't want to offend anybody, but if you think our purpose in life is to go around and straighten out people on transubstantiation or symbolism of communion, I strongly disagree. We got people starving to death today. We got people going to hell who need Jesus. And for me to try and convince Catholics that they shouldn't be in transubstantiation, or to convince Protestants that they should believe more strongly in the presence of Christ in communion, I mean, come on. I'm just glad you celebrate communion, okay? Focus on Christ, trust in him, and go at. The point I'm trying to make is, let's be careful with false prophet and true prophet and false Christian and true Christian. Now, we do have to draw some guidelines, some boundary lines. If you deny the deity of Christ, I don't think you're a follower of Christ. Christ claimed to be God. So if you deny his deity and reduce him to a good teacher, you are not following Christ. Secondly, if you deny his death on a cross to pay the penalty for our sin, you are denying the real Jesus. Thirdly, if you deny his bodily resurrection from the dead, if you talk about his resurrection simply as a spiritual thing, not a physical thing, you are not following Christ. Because
now, here is the video that I am referring to when I'm making this video, and I would like to split it down into three perspectives. Firstly is an agreement about the dangers of calling people false and true teachers. Of course, the Catholic Church and our Orthodox friends would agree with us that we have a magisterium, and of course, based on that, you could say who's a false and true teacher doctrinally. That's fine, I grant that. However, it is a very big danger on YouTube where people like to hunt for heresies. You know, we point out someone and say, oh, that guy's a heretic. And then we also then accuse people of saying that person's going to go to heaven or go to hell. If you've noticed throughout this whole debate, especially my disagreements with needgod.net and other people, I'm very cautious in saying, okay, that person's going to heaven and that person's going to hell. Because the Bible teaches us that, you know, we would be judged by the same standard we judge other people. And I'm very cautious of the fact to say, well, you know I'm not a perfect Catholic. I commit sin, I go to confession regularly, and I don't live a perfect life. And most of you who are watching this video probably do not as well. And that's already considering people actually care enough about Catholicism to actually watch videos online here about it. So a lot of people here, you know, have this high standard of, oh, we're just going to say that person's going to go to hell because he's a heretic. He disagrees with us, therefore he's going to go to hell. When if we want to be judged by that standard, I think a lot of us are going to recognize we probably don't reach that standard in which we can actually look ourselves in the face, look ourselves in the mirror and say, you know, hold up a second, I'm judging X, Y, and Z. I'm judging Cliffe. I'm going to judge this other person, Sam Shimon. I'm going to judge these people by saying these are horrible people. I'm going to look at that mirror. And then when I realize that mirror is looking back at myself, you know, I'm personally going to be very humble and saying, no, I don't think I'm in any position to say that person's going to hell and that person's not going to be going to hell. And that's why I call out needgod.net really strongly. It's not necessarily because I disagree with him about sola fide. Yes, doctrine's an important distinction, and I'd like to discuss doctrine with him. He hasn't replied to my emails yet. But what I really find it completely unacceptable is for him then to just threaten Sam Shimon to say, well, you're going to go to hell. Hell is a very long time. And I'm like, you know, that's just not on. And I think that's true for everyone. We could come onto YouTube, give our positions, but we're not God. We can't come on and say, all right, I have everything correct, you have everything wrong, therefore you're going to go to hell because you're a heretic. Salvation is way more complex and way more nuanced than this. We need to remember as Catholics, even as Catholics, that God is not bound by the sacraments. Yes, of course, the sacraments provide the easiest way to get into heaven. God has provided us with the sacraments such that we can draw closer to him. But then to say that, oh, someone must follow the Catholic understanding of Christianity just to get into heaven is something that no Catholic, or very few Catholics, well, actually, no, I take that back. I would say the Catholic Church has never formally held that position that there is no salvation outside the visible and invisible church. Now, of course, there's no salvation outside the church, but we need to recognize that there are people part of that invisible church which will be saved. Justin Martyr noted this in the early church in the first 200 centuries of Christianity, where he said that he hopes that people like Plato and Aristotle are in the bosom of Abraham, Thomas Aquinas in my discussion with Dr. John Sanders, I'll link up above, also refers to Aquinas, Thomas Aquinas, a great Catholic teacher, writer, who also believes that those who may not fall under the Catholic Church or this Christian message may have hope for salvation. And even now, with Vatican II, we have this continual emphasis on the idea that there is an invisible church, and that invisible church does work wonders. It's very easy for Catholics, I think, to look around and say, well, all right, we need to target the Protestants. We need to make sure that they become Catholic. And don't get me wrong, I want my Catholic brothers to become Catholic. I want my Protestant brothers to become Catholic. I'm not saying, it doesn't really matter whether you're Catholic or Protestant. That's not my argument. But my argument is to say, there are ways in which people who are not part of the Catholic Church, who do love Jesus a lot, and probably love Jesus more than a lot of Catholics, and I have full confidence, as much confidence as I can have, that those people will indeed be saved. And I have hope for their salvation. People like Cliffe, people like Stuart. I know some Protestants who really, really love Christianity. They really, really love Christ. And for me to then sit there and say, well, those people are going to hell, seems to just be a bit over the top. And this, of course, this concern, and the reason why I'm speaking about this is because if you watch Trent Horn's recent video, he talks about some shocking statistics. As much as people online seem to be going to Catholicism, or Orthodoxy seems to be becoming a reality, the statistics show the complete opposite. For every 100 Catholics joining the Catholic Church, 840 Catholics are leaving. Catholicism is not doing very well. It's very easy for us as Catholics to say, well, all right, the Protestants are the problem. The Protestants are going to hell. But then, we could only really say that, or we should only really be speaking a lot about it, yapping a lot about it, if we were quite confident the Catholic Church is doing very well as well. When that really isn't the case. The statistics don't point towards that. And in fact, if you look at some mass attendance numbers by the Pew survey in 2024, only 29% of Catholics attend Mass weekly, 11% attend Mass monthly, and 67% a few times a year. That's some shocking statistics, especially when we are aware of the nature of not attending Mass as mortal sin. Based on those statistics alone, that means 71% of Catholics are committing mortal sin. Now, of course, you could argue it's grave matter, not mortal sin, but people don't need to be really strongly catechized for them to realize you probably should be attending Mass. And if that's the case, why should we be focusing too much on saying, let's bash Cliffe for saying the most important thing is you love Jesus. These things on the transubstantiation isn't important. I wish Catholics did focus on loving Jesus a bit more, because then we'll be attending Mass. Then we'll probably stop having these situations of people leaving the church. Loving Jesus is what's preventing people from leaving the church, not some abstract idea about transubstantiation or about the sacraments or about sola fide. Now, of course, these things are important for the theologians, but if you're going to tell me that some random Catholic who's attending Mass every day is going to change a denomination because they read the Summa Theologia and they dislike the scholastic import of Aristotelian metaphysics into Catholicism, you got to be kidding me. Not many Catholics care about such stuff. And as much as you would like to think you're very smart because you've done and read the Summa Theologia, that you've read Aristotelian metaphysics, that you can then go on YouTube comment section and debate someone on these things, I mean, come on. There's things which are more important than that. And I'm saying this as an Oxford philosophy and theology student, If anyone online has an axe to grind to say, we want theologians who are really smart to go to heaven, I think out of pure selfishness, I'll be one of the first people to put my hands up, studying this thing, my hobby and also as my career. I research about philosophy and theology now, granted not church doctrine and things, but, I study theology more so than what most people can claim to be doing. But I'll never step here and say, just because you disagree with Catholicism that you're going to hell. Or, just because you disagree on transubstantiation that you're going to go to hell. Or to say, belief in transubstantiation is as important as belief in Christ. I'm like, come on. If we all believed in Christ, we're not going to have a weekly Mass attendance of 29% of the Catholic body in America. That's just simply not going to be the case. We have to look at, I think having a mirror is very important, before we start trying to call out other branches of Christianity to say, oh, you guys have it wrong, you guys are diminishing important parts of the doctrine, of Christian doctrine, we have to look at the mirror and say, well, are we holding close to the doctrines that we ourselves are saying is important? If we care so much about transubstantiation, care so much about the Eucharist, shouldn't we be trying to get our fellow Catholics to actually attend Mass and partake in it? You know, why isn't more effort being told or being done as Catholics to make sure our fellow Catholics, not even the Protestants, not even the atheists, are attending Mass? We're not even getting the basics right on our front. You know, I went on a blind date recently, and it turns out the person I was on a blind date with was a lapsed Catholic. And then, of course, it's Oxford, so it's quite a small community. And I was telling her, turns out she was lapsed Catholic. I said, you should really go to confession and go to Mass. And she wanted to go to confession and go to Mass, so I was explaining to her why she should. And it got back to me from another Catholic friend, a mutual Catholic friend of mine, that, oh, Josh Jen went on to blind date with someone, and he basically told her she was a sinner and she should go to Mass in somewhat of a joking and a slightly sarcastic way. And I was like, well, hold up a second. You're that person's friend, and you're a Catholic, and you know your friend's a lapsed Catholic. Shouldn't you be the one telling her? I shouldn't be the one needing to tell her on a blind date that you have to go to Mass again. We should be telling our fellow friends, holding each other accountable. How many of us are hidden behind social media, pressing, typing, all these comment sections to say, oh, you need to do this better, you need to do that better, oh, you got transubstantiation wrong, oh, Orthodox don't believe in transubstantiation, they believe in the real presence. Make all these tiny, well, of course, important, but nuanced theological matters when we don't even live out our faith in a proper way. We claim, we do so much virtue signaling. Oh, this is like, we complain about the left, these liberals like doing virtue signaling all the time. How much time do we theologically signal to pretend we're so smart at theology, and we fail to actually focus on what's the most important thing about our faith? Why should we be targeting or insulting or saying Cliffe is wrong on these things? Of course, he is wrong in some sense. But why are we challenging his beliefs so much? When probably if most Catholics watched his video and agreed with Cliffe, they would probably be doing more better things, attending Mass more if they love Jesus more as a result of watching Cliffe, than if they watched me respond to Cliffe, or me responding to another video on transubstantiation. That's why I would say Cliffe is right when he says, the most important thing is you love Jesus. That is the most important thing. It is the fact that we love Jesus. And of course, transubstantiation, these other things are important. I'm not going to say they're not important, because they are. There's good scriptural, theological, and historic reasons for us to believe in these important aspects of the faith. But it is also a real danger for us as Catholics to get caught up in these doctrinal disagreements and then lose sight of the bigger picture, which is loving Christ. And if you tell me, and if you ask me, Josh, who do you think will get into heaven? Who would I see in heaven? Of course, from an objective perspective, I would say, I don't know, because I'm not God. But if you ask me, would Cliffe get into heaven, despite everything he said, or would the Catholic who doesn't attend Mass at all, maybe attends on Easter Sunday and attends Mass on Christmas, go to heaven? Who would I see in heaven? I would say Cliffe. And I'm pretty sure as a Catholic, you kind of have to say the same thing. Because let's face it, if a Catholic's attending Mass twice a year, that's no longer the point of, willful ignorance. That's just clear, full knowledge, mortal sin. Now, what about the Cliffe or the person who attends Mass maybe whenever they feel like it? That means if they have something coming at work, they just say, whatever, I'm not going to go to the Saturday Mass. Instead, I'm just going to go and, not attend Mass for a few weeks, don't go to confession about it, and just say, that's all right. I would almost still want to say Cliffe. Now, I'm not going to say I'm God, and I'm not saying this as if I'm objective or I'm speaking the truth here. But this is what I like to think, is that when you have someone who really loves Christ, and with their full intention is trying to seek the truth, versus someone who has had the truth given to them, out of no fault of anyone else but their own, and are equally willing, with full knowledge, breaking the truth that's been given to them, which is the case for, as we've seen with the statistics, 71% of all Catholics. I think Catholics ourselves should have way more on our plate to deal with, and way more things to be concerned about. I hope this video isn't too controversial, but I think most of you would agree with me. And if you do disagree with me, let me know, what do you think in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. And this channel is a place that you can reflect, agree, disagree. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video. And like always, stay safe. See you soon. God bless. And I hope to see you in the next one. And pray for me, as I am also a sinner.